Hello and welcome back to the G5 Family channel. I hope you're doing well, and I want to thank you for stopping by and watching this video. Today we're going to be discussing the 13A, the Philippines Bureau of Immigration process for amending your 13A probationary or the first round visa to the 13A amendment to PRV or permanent resident visa. So as most of you know, the first round, you go through the whole process, you get it done, and you have a 1-year probationary. And a year later, you go through the process again to accomplish your permanent resident visa. Now, one thing I want to say about, well, not quite a year ago, but in May of last year, I put up a video on the probationary process. And again, that was just based on my own personal experience accomplishing that feat, that visa. And I have received tons of comments and questions and great feedback, and I just want to thank all of you for your tremendous support of that video. But I want to be sure and be clear that this video is taking you from the probationary to the permanent. That video was to get you the probationary visa, okay? Now, as I answer your questions, it's important to understand that I'm doing these based on my own personal experience. I am willing to do some research, and I have for many questions, especially I recall getting a couple of questions from someone in Italy. So there have been some questions that have been outside of my personal scope, but I do my best to research those, and if I feel comfortable giving a definitive answer, then I do that. Now, before we get into me sharing my experience, I'm going to roll a video when I was leaving my home province going over to Iloilo. I was on the ferry and I did do a little bit of a talk. So what I want you to do while I'm rolling this video, I want you to drop down into the description. There's 4 links that are going to take you to the Philippines Bureau of Immigration website to documents that you're going to need for the process. Now, whether you fill them out during this video or not, that's up to you. But essentially, you're going to need these 4 documents. So while I roll this clip, be listening and go get those documents. Okay? We'll see you back here in just a minute. Well, here we are. We're traveling between Bacolod City that way and Iloilo this way. It's about an hour and 45-minute ferry ride, and it is part of the trip to travel over to the Iloilo City Bureau of Immigration office. Hopefully this will be a one and done. It's possible, depending on how they want to manage the final visa stamp, whether I can leave my passport and documentation here and have them express mail it to me, or if they will want to me to come back for that piece. So the travel restrictions are lifting, getting a little bit easier to manage. This trip, after checking with the official agency in San Carlos, I learned that as of now there are actually no travel documentations required. I'll be entering the Iloilo City, the Dumangas port here in a minute, so we'll find out for sure. But I say in a minute, the next hour or so. But anyway, it's a little cloudy, a little overcast, so the ocean is looking a little gray. But after the cyclone that just came through, it's probably not the most clear that it would be anyway. So if the sky was clear, we would still be seeing a dark blue. But I can't ever get tired of the ocean. I always enjoy, and surprisingly smooth, especially considering the cyclone that just came through. But anyway, that's it for now. I will catch you back on screen. Thanks, bye. All right, so unfortunately that's the only vlog clip that I made for this trip. But anyway, at least you can kind of capture a little bit of the essence of making that trip over there. But anyway, go ahead and grab your coffee, grab your beverage of choice, and let's dive in. Now, on your screen, you should be seeing two panels. You should be seeing on the left the BI form, the Amendment to Permanent Non-Quota Immigration Visa by Marriage. And then on the right panel, you should be seeing the Bureau of Immigration website, which contains the documents that I just had you download from the description in the video. Now, you're welcome to look at both. The first link in the description is to this website. The good news here is that if you have accomplished your probationary, then this is going to be a walk in the park, especially if you did the probationary yourself. In the months since I did mine, I have heard many people talk about hiring an attorney or hiring a service to do all of this for you. Now, just so you understand, my personal preference is to do it myself, but there are some benefits to hiring a service to do it for you. For instance, for me, I'm comfortable with paperwork. I'm comfortable with contracts. I've been in consulting my whole career, and I've written thousands of contracts, so I'm very comfortable with managing paperwork. Maybe you're not. So that would be one reason why you might consider hiring a service. The second reason is just the cost. I spent a good bit of money. I don't know the totals, but I spent a good bit of money traveling from my home city, my home province, over to Iloilo City, fuel for my car, cost of the ferry, in some cases hotel, so there's expenses that go with that travel. And I will also say that the travel piece for me personally was way more difficult than the paperwork anyway. But again, there are some benefits. If you hire a service, then they do all of the footwork for you, the going back and forth for you. You pay them, but it may save you some money in the long run. Okay? So there are some benefits to hiring a service, and I'm not, closed-minded to that or opposed to it. I just like to manage my own stuff. Here's the thing. You do it yourself, you make a mistake, well, it's your mistake. But if somebody else makes a mistake on your behalf, that's a little bit more sticky. And so again, for me, I just rather do it myself. All right. I'm going to do this pretty quickly because, again, as I said, if you're following this video, you have already accomplished your probationary. You've already been through this. So a lot of this is going to be repetitive with some differing requirements. Okay. All right. So let's get into the general instructions. Now, I'm not going to read these word for word. I'm going to trust you to be able to do that. Enter legibly all of the information required. When I go through these, I have my original checklist has at least 17 different colors of highlighter, a lot of marking and rechecking my rechecks and so on and so forth. If you follow this and if you follow my advice in this, you'll be fine. I promise. Okay. As I said in the past, when you fill out the form, use capital letters, use block letters. Make it as clear and legible for them to read your information. Just makes it easier for you. Number 2, original copies. 2 original copies. I'm actually going to recommend 4. It's not much more money. It's just a few pennies more. 4 original copies. Now, what they mean by that, they're not asking for 4 original copies of your passport. It's not like that. But there are a couple of letters that we'll talk about here later, where you're going to go to an attorney's office and get some notarized, some notaries. And so they want you to have the original copies of those. They say 2, one is for the visa, the second is for your ACR card. Okay. Number 3, all documents required for submission must be complied with, arranged in the order. Yeah. So as you did in the first round, legal size folder, legal size paper stapled into the folder with the little clip. I don't mean to minimize that, but I think it's more than a preference. They definitely prefer it, but I think it's a requirement. And it's cheap. You can pick them up at anywhere. All sworn statements or affidavits must be original and duly notarized. We'll get into that in a minute. Registry documents in the Philippines, birth certificate, marriage certificate must be original and issued by the PSA. Okay, so for your marriage certificate, just order 2 copies. For your 3rd and 4th copy, copies are fine, just reprints or copies. But for the first two, go ahead and pay PSA. It's not very much money to get original copies of your marriage certificate, birth certificates, and things like that. Again, we'll get into the actual requirements in the list. All foreign documents must be original and authenticated by the Philippines Foreign Service Post, which has jurisdiction over this place. Just include your original documents. You're going to provide your passport. There's not a whole lot in this round that you're going to be providing. It's really mostly PSA stuff. Again, we'll get into it. These general instructions are general instructions, okay? If the application is filed by an authorized representative, you'll need to attach a photocopy of their accreditation and all that. The original valid passport of the applicant must be submitted. If the applicant is joined by his or her unmarried children below 21 years of age, submit all corresponding documentary requirements for each. Let me break that down for a second. The only reason why children would be involved in this process is if they are non-Filipino. In other words, they are not the children of you and your Filipino spouse. If they are the children of you and your previous spouse from your home country and are not Filipino, then and you're wanting to include them, in this process, and they're below the age of 21. But in my personal case, my children are born to me and my Filipino wife. So other than listing their names, there was no requirements. Okay. The applicant and or petitioner must always bring his original passport okay. So these are just standard, almost no need to mention type of things. Again, general instructions. All right. So let's get into the actual checklist. And again, this is going to go pretty quick because you've already been through the probationary process. This one is very similar. I'm just going to break each one of these requirements down. So number one, joint letter request addressed to the commissioner from the applicant and the petitioning Filipino spouse. Now, I have provided a sample. You can pause the video and do a screenshot, but essentially you are petitioning the commissioner. It is with much sincerity that I apply for my 13A amendment to permanent resident visa here in the Philippines. We have lived here in your home city. That's not his home city, but your home city for however many years, however many months, and have found our new life to be favorable and wish to remain here permanently. Our family consists of myself, an American, with my wife, a Filipino, and our however many children. My wife and children are Philippine citizens. Now, we actually, just to explain that, we went through the process. My wife, obviously she's a Filipina, but she did acquire her U.S. citizenship in the U.S. And then before coming back to the Philippines, she went through the paperwork process and acquired her dual citizenship. So she's a Filipino citizen. And then we did the same thing. We registered our children's birth with the Philippines embassy, and then they automatically default. They are Philippine citizens, the same as they're also American citizens by birth to me. Okay, so that's just a sample. You can customize that to your liking, but it's just essentially a joint letter from you and your Filipino spouse petitioning this amendment to PRV. Okay. And this does need to be, that's interesting that it doesn't say that here, but it does need to be, maybe we just got it notarized. Maybe we just did that to be safe, but it just says joint letter request addressed to the commissioner. Okay, so you get it. The duly accomplished CGAF BI form, I'm going to show you, this is the form that you have downloaded right here. I'm going to show you how I filled out mine. I'm covering up my personal information, of course, but you can see how I did block letters. Now, I use Adobe Acrobat to fill in the information, but you can see how I used capitalized block letters, making it very clear, very easy to read what the application is all about. Okay. All right. So you'll need 2 of those. I recommend 4. Do your 2 copies, sign those, make you a photocopy, make 2 more photocopies to create your 3rd and 4th folder. I'm telling you, they required me to have 4 in my first round. The second round, interestingly enough, they only needed the 2, but I made 4. Just better be safe than sorry, because the first round, it was a scramble to get around and make photocopies and buy the folders and all that. I mean, we managed it, but it was not easy. It took a couple of hours. Okay. Number 3, a joint affidavit of continuous cohabitation of applicant and the petitioning spouse. Now, I put my sample up here. You can do a screenshot and use this as a sample form. Essentially, they just want a letter that states that you have been living with your spouse. Now, if you understand the whole process of the visa, especially by marriage, it's really just for them to ascertain the legitimacy of the marriage. And so they're issuing you a visa based on the marriage. They want it to be legitimate, okay? And if you're not cohabitating with your wife, then obviously that's going to raise questions, right? We, Filipino spouse, and for an applicant, myself, American citizen, both of legal age and married to each other and residents of our home city, not his, our home province, Philippines, after having been duly sworn in accordance with law, hereby jointly depose and truly say we have been in continuous cohabitation as man and wife since marriage date. We were legally married in whatever city, state, USA. If you were married here in the Philippines, obviously you just need to say we were legally married wherever. Number 3, we continue to live together in continuous cohabitation as man and wife with our XYZ children. Okay. In witness whereof we hear, so that's where we got the attorney office to notarize the document. We notarized 2 and made photocopies for the 3rd and 4th folder. Okay. All right. So, the stuff is really straightforward, but it really helps to put a visual. Okay. Number 4, a photocopy of your passport bio page, visa implementation page, and latest admission with valid authorized stay. Now, it seems very simple, but I'll break it down. They want the image of your passport that shows your face and all your personal information. And then they want a photocopy of the stamp of your latest entry into the Philippines. Whether it's 2 years ago or last year or last month, they just want a photocopy of the most recent visa stamp in your passport. Now, with the pandemic, it's been a couple of years for everybody. So just whatever's the most recent entry visa in your passport. Okay. Again, they're not asking you to include, they will ask you for your passport, but they're not asking for you to put 2 copies or 4 copies. Just take photocopies of those pages, put them in your folders. Okay. Number 5, valid National Bureau of Investigation, your NBI clearance. In the first video, I won't go into as much depth, but I recommend maintaining a current NBI clearance. It's just good to have it. Remember, we're not living in our home countries. We live in a foreign country. So that NBI it shows that you're well behaved. So it's like a police clearance. Okay. Now I'm not going to go into the process to get that. You can go to the NBI, and I'll put a link in the description for the NBI so you can go through that process. Now, the BI clearance certificate, the Bureau of Immigration Office actually provides that. I wish they would put that in parentheses because it is confusing. But number 6, you can check that off. The BI office will actually provide that. Okay, and then 7, original or certified true copy of Bureau of Quarantine medical clearance. Now, you'll need to reference the Annex A to determine if your country is listed or not. The U.S. is not listed on the Annex A, therefore, you're not required to provide this Bureau of Quarantine medical clearance at all. It's not even needed. You can check that off. But check the Annex A just to make sure that if you're from another country, well, for that matter, check to make sure the U.S. is not suddenly on that list, okay? I just know that from my experience, it's not on the list. Now, for dependents, as I mentioned earlier, in the next section, checklist of documentary requirements for each dependent. Again, these are if you are bringing dependents over from your non-Filipino marriage. So you have, let's just say you're previously married, you had children from that previous marriage, and it was not Filipino, of course. It was another country's citizenship. Then in that case, you would include all of this documentation for them. If not, then you don't need it at all. Now, there was a third document that it doesn't ask for here, and I'll show you that form right here. I did provide this listing my Fil-Am, in other words, our children between me and my Filipino wife. We listed their names and their information on this form, and this form is listed in the description. Now, that's it. That's really and truly it. Just to top it off, the only other thing I'll mention is by accomplishing this, your ACR card will go from being a 1-year card to being a 5-year card. The 13A visa never expires, at least under the current structure. It does not expire, but you do have to go in annually, one time a year, to do what they call a check-in. And the good news is, even for me, is I can go to my nearby office, which is just a couple of hours away, and we go over there anyway. So it's not like I have to go out of province or get a ferry to go to the other office. I can do that locally, and it's 310 pesos currently is the fee. And so you just go by there, you sit down, you have a little interview. Now, I will include that link as well. It is by appointment, and actually the annual check-ins are occurring right now. So if you have your probationary, you will need to go in and get do your check-in. So I recommend that. I'll put a link so that you can go in and register and make your appointment. So I'll be doing that in a couple of weeks. But other than that, once you get this done, you are golden, my friends, and you will no longer have to do the monthly or the bi-monthly or the bi-yearly visa extensions. You're no longer required to do the exit and the re-entry, although that's a great program. The 1-year Balik Beyond is a great program, but you no longer have to do that. And I'll add this, by accomplishing your permanent resident visa, when going through the pandemic, when I would look at some of the requirements, it would say Filipino citizen or spouse of or long-term visa. Now, what I kind of adopted the phrase is, I would never relinquish my American or my U.S. citizenship, of course, but the next best thing to being a Filipino citizen is a permanent resident visa. So you almost get to enjoy the same benefits. Obviously, we are still foreigners. We still cannot own or operate a business or own property or all of those kinds of things, right? But, I didn't move here to do that anyway. I moved here to enjoy the simple life. All right, folks. So that's it. That's the lesson on getting your 13A visa, your amendment from probationary to PRV or permanent resident visa. I wish you the absolute best in every aspect of your life. Thank you again for watching my video, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.